That was a great reminder of that. I'm going to start with the PowerPoint. Let's see. Will you give me my first picture? I forgot to tell him that I was going to start with PowerPoint. Oh, but first, while we're waiting, look at that picture. I was at the park yesterday, and I ran into a newcomer who had only been in Des Moines for a week. And she was at Gray's Lake, which is the place I like to go to. And she was talking to a kid, and she said, "What is with the weather? It's been a kind of crummy week. When is it going to get better?" And the little kid said, "I don't know, I'm only 6. I promise that's my last one. And to tell you the truth, I looked those up from Seattle jokes. Yeah, I was born in Seattle, so I feel like I can whine with the best of you about weather. All in all, I find Des Moines to be a little sunnier than Seattle. So here is this adorable picture from the Book of Joy of these two awesome men. What's particularly delightful in this book for me is that the Dalai Lama represents compassion and Eastern thought and Buddhism, of course, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu is Episcopal, so he's like the Christian tradition. And yet they're both such awesome, loving bundles, like they're tiny little old men, but they're so powerful. They both are known for compassion and forgiveness, and they're world figures. So isn't it awesome that in our world today, that those two people with their attributes are very famous and could walk, anywhere, and people would just about anywhere know who they were and treat them with respect and love and caring. I think that's awesome. So I'm just finding this book to be full of gems for my life personally, and hopefully you're finding some of the things I pass on to you to be really happy. The thing I wanted to talk about today was joy in the face of suffering. And with the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop, both of them have suffered. Both of them have suffered. Physically, mentally, with oppression, and they both have been politically repressed and suffered, and physically, and they've triumphed. So the question is, how do you triumph in the midst of suffering? All suffering is bad. Whatever the level of suffering. I know one thing, no matter how, when you think your suffering is bad, like when you're in the middle of suffering, there's no level of it. It's just bad, whatever you're suffering from. Kind of like there's no measure of it. It just is. So here's something the Dalai Lama said. I hope you can read that. And I'll read it. He says, mental immunity is just learning to avoid the destructive emotions and to develop the positive ones. Some thoughts and emotions are harmful, even toxic, and others are healthy and healing. We take preventative measures, training our minds, meditation. So, he's saying that although he also teaches that thoughts arise, he's teaching that we do have some choice in what we're going to hang out with. I know that's true for me. I know that I can hang out with everybody in the universe has my back thought, and I can I can also go down the dark rabbit hole of I am being thwarted by everybody. Mm-hmm. This is what the Archbishop says. You probably, I don't know, that might be too tiny. I think we've got to accept ourselves as we are, and then hope to grow in the way the Dalai Lama described, getting to know the things that trigger us. These are things that you can train, you can change, but we ought not to be ashamed of ourselves. We are human, and sometimes it is a good thing that we recognize that we have human emotions. Many times, the Archbishop said over and over again, guilt and shame only make our negative thoughts more intense. So I'm going to actually go backwards, I think, just so we look at those guys for a while I'm talking, because I think they're so cute. So the other thing I want to note is there is an interesting facet of Western culture that Buddhist teachers, and I've told you this story before, that when a bunch of Buddhist teachers, East and West, got together, the Western teacher said there's one more thing you have to allow for when you're teaching Buddhism, that there is, in Western culture, there is a shame and an unworthiness that you have to deal with. So you always have to address that. In the Eastern culture, they're like, what? They didn't have to address it. So the Dalai Lama isn't necessarily going to teach that. Archbishop Desmond Tutu is going to teach that guilt makes it worse. And everybody, I know all of us in this room, we're experts at guilting ourselves. It's just how we were all raised. It is really part of our culture. And a good deal of what we want to do is release ourselves from guilt. I noticed that when I'm going through something that might be stressful, no matter what it is, whether it's if I'm trying to do too much, or I'm worried about something, or I'm taking care of someone, or whatever something might put me into stress, that I have this, it's like I have a 3-year-old who will sometimes start driving my bus. And the 3-year-old pretends to be, a grown-up, but she's a little bratty 3-year-old. Can you relate? Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, one of the very first metaphysical lessons I ever learned when I wandered into my self-help workshop in the 80s, and really that did start my transformation and my trip toward enlightenment. Hear me, I'm toward it, I'm not anywhere near. But they taught me this thing about fear, that a lot of us have a fear thought. In the West, a lot of it's around shame, or anger or fear. We have a fear thought that we're afraid of, and we hide it, and we build something around it. There's the fear that of who we're afraid we are. We're afraid we're unworthy. We're afraid we're not good enough. We're afraid we're inadequate. Whatever it is, we're afraid of. And the fear, but we hide it because we really do not like that thought. So we build this facade around the fear. There's a layer of fake, I'm worthy, like bravado around it. But in unity and spiritually, what we want to do is go through the bravado, the who you pretend to be. I pretend to be a minister every week. Underneath that, I still have a layer of fear. I still have the 3-year-old will still pop up and drive my bus. The 3-year-old feels inadequate and thinks she's not good enough. Thinks she's not enough to do what she has to do. But underneath that, like I was talking about in the meditation, there is that core of love. What Cindy said? She said, I couldn't even say it better. She said, what we are, we're loved. I do believe, I am a theist in that I believe with Archbishop Desmond Tutu that there is a loving presence. I call it all that is a lot. I don't see it as the Christian idea of God so much, but I feel that there is this loving, benevolent presence that loves us, and it is a miracle to me. And that is actually the center of us, and that's what this is about. The teachings of Archbishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama are about how we get to our center, the real part of us. Let me move ahead a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go back. So, how do we deal with these obstacles to joy? The first step is we accept the reality of suffering. Both teachers say that. The first step is that we accept the reality of suffering. That when I was talking about surfing today, but let's face it, everybody here has a life that is not a float down the river on an inner tube, right? Everybody here has got rapids, as long as we're going to stick to the river thing, sharks, even though there's not a lot of sharks in rivers, whatever it is, that's what we got in our life. We have that. And it is our job every day to find the center of us, And it takes courage. That's why I was so happy that the board wanted to do some training with the Enneagram system, which is just, you're finding, it's kind of exploring the pretend layer, our ego layer, and how to deal with it. I have not transcended my ego, so I actually have to deal with it a lot. I have to, when I find the core of me, I still have, I've still got plenty of ego hanging on, and it really helps to know what my ego habit is, what my pattern is. One of my patterns is to talk a lot. See, she knows me. One of my patterns is to feel my feelings, I think I love to feel my feelings, and I love to share my feelings. That's not everybody's habit. Like Zach was telling us, not everybody likes that. We all have different ways of, we've built our own ego protection. So it's interesting because I just am very excited about the two ways we go at it, We go right to the core. We can always go to the magic bullet, you are the Christ. And we can also explore some of our fear layer, and that helps too, because let's face it, we're all in this together, and our egos are going to be talking to each other and making some movies or plays or whatever it is we do, right? We're going to do that. We're all going to do that. Now, I have two more things I want to address for today's talk, and to me it relates because everything relates, but I'll try and bring this in together. Now, I have definitely been working with how to be joyful in the face of suffering, and I'm not even suffering. Roland, as you know, Roland had a health challenge. He's got 2 more bumps in the road, and then we think we'll be on our way. He's going to have a surgery on Wednesday, which will be a little minor surgery to clean up his wound. And then the following Wednesday, he's going to have a surgery to take some muscle from his back, put it on his leg to heal the wound, get some skin graft from one other part, take some leg veins from another leg. And so he'll be in the hospital 10 days. So I know that even though he's the one doing the suffering, I am such a good wife, I'm suffering along with him. That, of course, is silly. The deal is, I love him, and it is stressful for having people you love have anything that hurts them. And also, I'm trying to be a good nurse, and some of you may know that I think I'm pretty good, but it is not my natural personality. It's just not my natural personality. But there's nowhere I'd rather be than taking care of Roland. Absolutely nowhere I'd rather be than taking care of Roland. And, sometimes that's a mixed blessing for him. I can't see him. He's hiding, so I can't see if he's enjoying this or not enjoying this, but that's okay. What I want to say is I wish I could say that when I'm navigating this stuff, it's been since October, since when I've been navigating this, I have just been meditating and going to the Christ almost all the time. I can't say that. I wish I could say I have been doing my spiritual practice and I have been going to find my Christ self, 20% of the time. I don't even know that that's true. I don't know what percentage it is. Let's just say it's not huge. But the thing that I am really happy about is that I have the tools so that whenever I find myself suffering and miserable, if I actually figure it out. Hi guys, I'm glad you're here. Sorry, you have to get a little more talking. That whenever I can notice, it's like I can be miserable without noticing. Are you ever miserable without noticing? You think you're just living your life, and all of a sudden you notice you said something snippy to somebody, or you bursted into tears or whatever. I can be miserable without noticing, but as soon as I notice, because of these teachings, I really can snap myself out of it. And because of reminding myself not to be guilty, I always spend a little bit of time agonizing in guilt, but it's shorter and shorter. It's shorter and shorter. And I can pretty quickly get to forgiveness of myself and the people that are thwarting me. Pretty quickly I can get there. And that is why we want to keep coming here and learning this stuff. There's 2 more of these books in the bookstore if you want one. I know a lot of you already have had it and read it. And the next thing I want to show is that it's almost a little sideline, but it really has a lot to do with life. The Unity of Des Moines community building meetings, the system of change, expansion, growth at Unity Des Moines. The board recognized that we needed to define the expectations we held for the teams and clarify the decision-making process at Unity of Des Moines because it was confusing and also it's a changing thing, I love everybody that has ever served with me on the board. They have been high-thinking people and wonderful human beings who have volunteered and put in so much time because they care about our community. And it's the same with the board now. So I just want to show you, it should be a circle, but if you make it a circle, it's hard to make the words the right side up. So here's what happens. This is what we've been trying to do with our community building meetings. We kind of got together and formed some teams. With the ideas from the congregation, we put the ideas into teams. The teams bring their ideas to the board. The board gives approval of plans and purchases. Then says, okay, directs the teams to act. The teams act. The congregation also joins in the act and receives whatever it is. And then the congregation generates more ideas. So it's a circle. And so we wanted to change things. We didn't want this top-down stuff. But so we're learning how to do it differently, and we're not actually perfect yet. So we had a bunch of community team meetings, and now we're learning our way about how to get this going. And the board hasn't, we talked about it as a board, they haven't actually seen this slide, so we may fine-tune it again. But, but I think this is pretty much what we're doing. Here's the ministry teams that we formed when we said, who wants to form teams? We formed, the interest groups were Sunday service and youth education, basement remodel team, bookstore team, community outreach team. And the boards generated another team, and I just made up the name for it. It's stewardship team. We could call it a fundraising team, but I'm going to call it stewardship team for now, which includes an annual giving campaign, fundraising, and also spiritual education on stewardship or spiritual education on giving, why you want to give, all that stuff. So this is a team that the board said we also need this team, and it hasn't even started yet. Okay, it's just that we realized we need this team also. Now here's something that I'm really excited about. We did a pancake breakfast with the School of Metaphysics, and they teach a lot of the same stuff as we do. The one thing I learned that I really liked from when Mavis was talking, and I may have mentioned this in 1 or 2 talks, because I'm going to probably keep pounding it, that they kept saying the reason for this pancake breakfast isn't just to make money and have a pancake breakfast and have fun. It's also for the people who are having the pancake breakfast to work together and notice what's going on with them, to notice what's triggering them, and to evolve spiritually. And that we want to be conscious when we work with each other, because what triggers us more than anything? Oh, people. What triggers us more than anything? Working together and trying to work out what we're doing. So this is my way of putting that when we're going to go back to these teams, we're kind of going to hit them again with a new focus. We ask that each member make a commitment that participating on a team is an agreement to grow spiritually, utilizing self-awareness and the unity teachings. That's a big deal for me. And I feel like we had that kind of an unspoken thing, but I wanted to make it spoken. I need to look at that every day. I need another tattoo that says, everything I do is an agreement to grow spiritually, right? Everything I do is my agreement to grow spiritually. So when I think I'm in here, and let's say I'm on a team to see what we're going to do in the bookstore, that's not the real reason I'm on the team. The real reason I'm on the team is to grow spiritually and evolve spiritually and to be with my other people and to grow them, because I am pretty sure I can trigger them given half a minute. It's my job. So I just wanted to say that this is the short version of the unity teachings. There's only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the good omnipotent. Unity of Des Moines is a radiating center of God's love, mighty to attract its good and to radiate good to the others. Sounds familiar? So that's like nothing and no one is against me. That's like in a nutshell. And then our center, like we consciously gather together to be a center of God's love and radiate that. And then this is kind of the longer version of unity teachings. You might know the 5 teachings. God is the source and creator of all. There is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. 2, we are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each person, even me now. All people are inherently good. Number 3, we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Thoughts held in mind, produce after their kind. 4, there is power in affirmative prayer, which we believe increases our connection to God. And 5, the knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them, which is walk our talk. So that is why I am so happy that the board was willing to spend a whole Saturday walking their talk and learning about their personality that might be high, what their fear level is so that they could get closer to the Christ in them. And why I'm so happy that any person who joins, anybody who comes in the door, anybody who joins a community building team is also ready for that. And here's what's funny. I was going to end my talk with that thing that Zach read because I thought it was so beautiful. And I'm not going to read the whole thing again. But the trainer we had brought this to us, the stages of the work. I'm just going to read the last 3 ones because I think it's beautiful. If we were to will what God wills, we would be transformed. If we were transformed, the world would be transformed. If the world were transformed, all would return to God. Let's take an offering for unity. I invite you to take your tithe or your love offering in your hand, and let's say our affirmation together. As we get it ready, divine love